We'd like to welcome you today to our latest episode called Apostolos. And we believe that everyone who is saved, God is calling to be sent. And with me today, I have a really good friend named Dr. Castleberry. And currently, what is your position at
I am
Northwest?
president of Northwest University, finishing my 18th year there.
Wow. And Dr. Castleberry was just telling me that he used to have his own podcast in the early 2000s. So you're a pro at this.
Oh, no, I was a beginner long ago, but I have been on many podcasts through the years.
And Dr. Castleberry, you have, I know you're visiting us. The reason why you're here is because you're speaking at a district conference and you brought your wife with you. And do you have family? Can you share a little bit about your family?
Well,
And
we don't have family in Hawaii, but we love to bring them here as often as we can. I have three daughters. They're all married, and they have seven grandchildren for me.
right.
And so each of my three daughters has children now, and we maybe expect we'll get three more. Who knows?
Wow.
As time goes by, but we sure love having them. And coming to Hawaii is always a
Mm.
privilege for
Hmm.
anybody, and
Hmm.
not just for the reasons that everybody knows about. Everybody
Yeah.
knows about the beautiful beaches and the
Right.
rainforest and the
Right.
all the wonderful tourism features of Hawaii,
Hmm.
but it's the Hawaiian people that really make Hawaii
Mm.
a beautiful place to
Hmm.
be. Such a spirit of hospitality and aloha.
Right.
Everyone should feel great to be here. It's really the people that make Hawaii special.
Mm. Well, speaking of special, I know that our church, especially our staff, Pastor Cole, has asked our staff to read through your book called The Sixth Great Awakening. And I'm really excited because I would like for not only this episode, but also the following episode to really deep dive into this latest interest, as you put it, the latest interest that you have about what God is doing, not only today, but yesterday and then tomorrow. And so it's really neat how you're able to connect what God has done in the past and help us to see possibly what God is going to do in the future. And so, could you tell us, maybe just get started and just start talking about uh, where you got started. How did you get started with this book called The Sixth Great Awakening?
Well, thanks for asking. Back in the 1990s,
Mhm.
1996, I was a doctoral student at Columbia University in New York
Okay.
City, and one of my classes looked at Strauss-Howe generational theory as a
Mm.
way of understanding at that time, it was Gen X
Yeah.
that was coming through college, and um, it was a fascinating way of looking at the generations.
Mm.
That's a long time ago now. It's
Mhm.
nearly 30 years
Yeah.
ago that I first encountered Strauss-Howe theory. But as the years have gone by, I've seen how the generations have come along, how the
Mm.
millennial generation grew up. They
Mhm.
were children in
Mhm.
those years, and
Yeah.
how they grew up, and then the generation that followed them, Generation Z, and now the younger generation coming on, Generation Alpha, just little tiny kids now. But I saw as they came along and as history unfolded over these
Yeah.
last 30 years, I saw what a powerful structure Strauss-Howe generational theory
Mhm.
gives us um, for predicting the broad strokes of the future.
Mm.
And so I've been thinking about it for 30 years or so. Last year, the Central Pacific Ministry Network, that is the Hispanic district of Central California and
Mhm.
Nevada, invited me to come and do a seminar for their ministers' retreat
Okay.
on generational ministry. Of
Oh.
course, I work with the Gen Z all the time at
Mhm.
Northwest University
Right.
and have been in higher education long enough to have had significant experience of Gen X and the
Mhm.
millennials and now
Mhm.
Gen Z.
Yeah.
I'm 65 years old now. I've seen a few things come and go, and
Right.
have seen three delightful generations come through
Mm.
after my own.
Mhm.
So I went and did that, and it was so well received by the pastors that I sat down and wrote the book.
Wow.
And it took 19 days to write the book from the day I sat down till the day it was finished, and then I translated it into Spanish in the next week, and then published it in early September. I wanted it out so badly that
Wow.
I rushed it. I published it through Northwest University
Mhm.
Press instead of through a major
Yeah.
publishing house because I didn't want to have to wait a year for the marketing
Mm.
process and
Yeah,
all the
yeah,
rest
yeah.
to kick in, and because I just felt like it was a timely message, and man, was that ever right.
Mm.
The book has had a terrific reception. It was featured in Influence magazine this
Wow.
last month on the cover, and so people around the Assemblies of God are
Yeah.
talking about this idea, and in other churches as well, that we are about 20 years away from
Mhm.
the next Great Awakening, what I call the
Wow.
sixth Great Awakening,
Wow.
and that these 20 years of shadow before that awakening are going to be a time of tremendous renewal in the church. The
Mm.
subtitle of the book is The Coming Renewal of the American Church.
Okay.
And I strongly believe, on the patterns of history and on the basis of Strauss-Howe theory, that we're going to see in the next 20 years a crescendo in the church.
Mm.
We're going to see revivals happening
Yeah.
throughout the country and around the world. Right now, everyone is talking today, especially about what they call the quiet revival in England.
Mm.
Church attendance among Gen Z in
Okay.
England
What?
has quadrupled in the last couple of years.
Wow.
Uh, People are just flocking back to young people are flocking
Yeah.
back to church in England. And Of course, everybody's excited about that.
Yeah.
England has been in such a bad position
Mhm.
spiritually for a long time now.
Yeah.
Church attendance had gotten down to about 4%, and
Mhm.
but it's making a real rebound among young people.
Wow.
So anyway, it's um, I believe that we're going to have 20 years of crescendo building up to a great awakening in which we will see literally millions of people
Mm.
around the country come to Jesus, come
Mhm.
back to faith,
Mhm.
and we will see the same thing happening around the world. My next book will be a sequel to the Sixth Great Awakening, and it will trace the global reasons to expect out in
Mm.
other countries, the global reasons to
Wow.
expect a global Great Awakening in the 2040s
Wow.
that could be the greatest harvest of souls the church has ever seen in all of human history.
Wow.
If you look at the body of Christ right now in the world,
Mhm.
of course, there are more Christians in the world now than there have ever been.
Okay.
But there are more Christians alive in the world today than there are dead in the grave
Mm.
from the past 2,000 years.
Mm.
That's because of the incredible increase in the world population. And
Mhm.
Christianity has been able to stay slightly ahead of the overall increase of population. So there are more than 2 billion Christians alive in the world today. Um, and this is the greatest time the church has ever known. Now, these aren't the greatest days we've seen, but it's
Right.
the greatest epoch. It's the greatest
Mhm.
period of time we've ever seen. Over the last 30 years or so, American Christianity, well, since 1948, American Christianity has been in a powerful, powerful time. We've gone through a terrible crisis. We've
Yeah.
gone through a terrible decline in church membership and church
Mhm.
attendance uh, over the last 20 years, particularly. But still, the church in America is very strong, and
Mhm.
we're going to see tremendous growth, tremendous
Mm.
development, spiritual revival
Mm.
in the next 20 years to preparing us
Yeah.
for the harvest that's coming. When that comes, it will be the greatest spiritual awakening in the
Mm.
history of the world, and
Mm.
maybe even the final harvest of the world before Jesus
Wow.
returns. Now, he can come back whenever he wants to.
Yeah.
Jesus does not subscribe to Strauss-Howe
Yeah.
generational theory. God does whatever he wants to do.
Yeah.
The Bible suggests that God knew the day and the hour of Jesus' return, although he didn't know, certainly during
Mhm.
his time on
Mhm.
earth. But Jesus says the Father has set the times and seasons according to his own authority.
Mm.
It's God's decision of what happens in the world, and God doesn't have to wait for some social theory to
Right.
tell him when to bring the curtain
Right.
down on the world, or when he can bring the great revival that will be the final
Yeah.
salvation push for the world. But if things continue as they have been,
Right.
we should expect a tremendous revival, and
Mm.
revivals going along, and then
Mhm.
a tremendous awakening
Yeah.
in the 2040s. I look forward to living to see it. I'm
Yeah.
65 years old. I'd like to
Mhm.
make it another 25, 30
Let's
years
go.
and see the great victory of God in our world in our time. But I'm one of those people that's, I'm a Pentecostal. I believe in the return
Mhm.
of Jesus, and
Yeah.
I'm waiting for him every day.
Yeah.
I want him to come right now. But if Jesus tarries, as we old
Right.
Pentecostals used to say, if Jesus
Right.
tarries,
Mhm.
we can expect beautiful things to happen
Yeah.
over the next 30 years.
So looking at Strauss-Howe theory, uh, what I understand and as I've read your book, could you talk about because Strauss-Howe theory is looking backwards in order to look forward, right? And looking at
Mhm.
what has happened in the past, and in your book, you talk about uh, how Strauss-Howe theory is very intentional about looking at generations.
Yes.
Could you explain to us? Because I know you're so excited about
Mm.
Strauss-Howe theory. Could you explain to us and give us a little insight into what is Strauss-Howe theory and how does it help us to see what has happened in the
Mhm.
past and how it affects
Yeah.
the
Well,
future?
first of all, let's say that social theories are not the
Mhm.
truth.
Yeah.
The truth is, it's solid and it's
Yeah.
eternal and it's enduring.
Mhm.
Social theories are not the truth. They are ways of looking at things.
Sure.
They might be more or less useful.
Mhm.
In some ways, they might be useful. In other ways, they might not be useful. But they're not. It's not like the law of gravity, right?
Right.
It's
Right.
not like a scientific law. If you look up Strauss-Howe theory, Strauss-Howe generational theory in Wikipedia, it will tell you it's a pseudoscientific view of history.
Mm.
Well, how could you have a scientific view of history?
Mm.
There is no such thing as
Right.
exactly a scientific view of history.
Yeah.
History is in the eye of the beholder to some
Mm.
extent, right?
Mhm.
But Strauss-Howe theory has done a really great job of predicting the last 40 years of American
Mm.
history, and I think it does a great way. It does a great job of organizing the last 400 years of American history, the last
Mm.
800 years of Western history,
Mm.
are I think well illustrate the uh, the cyclical view of history
Okay.
that is Strauss-Howe theory. So the basic idea of Strauss-Howe theory, and this is William Strauss and Neil Howe were
Mhm.
the two thinkers that came up with
Oh.
this in the really came up with this
Mm.
in the 1980s and 90s.
Mhm.
Um, but they see um, history as advancing through generations.
Mm.
Now that isn't a theory; that's a reality.
Yeah.
I have children, and they have children.
Yes.
Generations are as real as time itself.
Yes.
If you think about time, you know that the Earth takes 24 hours to rotate on its axis. That's
Mhm.
an objective measure of time.
Mhm.
The sun takes roughly 365 days to orbit around the sun.
Mm.
That's an objective measure of time. Um, and it stays the same from year to year.
Yeah.
It might be a tiny little difference happening over the course of the millennia, but it's
Mm.
pretty steady.
Mhm.
Um, Generations are undeniable. I have a
Yeah.
child, a
That's right.
generation has been born.
Mm.
That child has a child, another
Mhm.
generation has been born. So
Mhm.
generations are real things. And it takes about 20 to 25 years for generations to renew themselves.
Okay.
I was 28 when my first child was born.
Yeah.
My father was 25 when I was born. He was
Mm.
23 when his first child was
Mm.
born. Over the course of history, the age of childbirth or first childbirth has gotten longer.
Right.
You can think of a generation as being 20 to 25 or 20 to 30 years. Um, it's not an exact number, but it's a real thing.
Mhm.
So Strauss and Howe say that generations last about 20 years and that um, the generations occur within what they call ages or secula. Seculum is the Latin term for age, right?
Mm.
In Hebrew, they talked about one's days. In
Mhm.
Latin, they talked about the secula.
Mm.
They talked about the eons in Greek. But all the ancient peoples had this notion of an age.
Mm.
An age is basically the lifespan of a person.
Okay.
I know exactly what my age is right now. I
Mhm.
am 65 years old in a few
Yeah.
days.
Okay.
Um, but I don't know what the total number
Right.
of years and days my age will be. But when I die, they will carve it on a rock.
Mm. Mhm.
Put me in a
Yeah.
cemetery, and it'll have my birthday and my
Yeah.
death day, and that's what my age was.
Mhm.
And for most human beings, that's going to be about 80 years. The Bible
Mm.
says we live 70 years, 80 if we have the strength in Psalm 90,
Mhm.
right? Um, so an age usually lasts about 80 years. Now, that happens at the level of individuals, but they're suggesting that an age happens at the level of civilizations as well, or societies. And so an age is typically made up of it can be 80 to 100 years, and it can be made up of 4 generations.
Mm.
Um, and so what they see is that along with these generations, but not at the exact same timing,
Okay.
but societies go through seasons.
Mm.
Seasons are real-time things as well, right?
Yeah.
Every year you have 4 seasons, at least up in the northern part of the world. Here in Hawaii, you only really
We
have
only have 2.
2 seasons, and rainy and dry,
Yeah.
right? But up in the northern parts of the world, you have 4 seasons. In the southern
Mhm.
parts of the world, you
Mhm.
have 4 seasons,
Yeah.
and they always follow the same: winter, spring, summer, fall. Winter, spring, summer, fall. And
Mm.
um, there are physical reasons why those seasons happen, and there are biological reasons why
Mhm.
those seasons happen.
Mhm.
It's sort of a fusion of biology and physics that makes seasons happen.
Mm.
Um, and so societies also have seasons, and they suggest
Mm.
that societal seasons look kind of like winter, spring, summer, and fall.
Mm.
Society will have a winter. That is a time of crisis. It will last about 20 years. After that crisis is resolved, there'll be such a burst of energy
Mm.
that there'll be a new economic boom. There might be national victory. There's a sense of high expectation because the crisis is over.
Yeah.
People are relieved. People are
Right.
excited and optimistic, and they start believing again. They start having
Mm.
visions. They start founding new institutions. And so during what they call a high or a springtime,
Mm.
society flourishes and thrives, and it's a beautiful thing.
Mhm.
Uh, you could think of um, you could think of the previous crisis in America as being the Great Depression and World War II, from
Mm.
1929 roughly to 1945. Not quite
Mhm.
20 years, but certainly the worst crisis we ever faced up to that
Yeah.
point. But that was followed by what they call the golden age of capitalism from
Mm.
1945 to 1965. And that was a time of tremendous high in the society. It was a boom,
Mm.
and it was around the world. As a matter of fact, that
Mm.
all over the world, we saw capitalism just producing tremendous wealth. We saw standards of living rising all over the world. Literacy rates, democracy rates. It was unbelievable, though, the advance that
Mm.
happened in the world between 1945 and 1965.
Mhm.
And then after that sort of springtime in a society, they say there will be what they call an awakening. And in an awakening, people who have figured out that money doesn't answer all their problems
Mm.
start looking for spiritual solutions.
Mm.
Now, during a high, when an economic boom, the parents are making money and they're making money and they're having a great time, and
Yeah.
they're completely consumed with making money usually,
Mhm.
and their kids feel kind of empty.
Mm.
They sort of resent the materialism of their parents,
Mm.
and they start looking for something deeper.
Yeah.
That happened in America in about 1968 when the consciousness revolution came along and kids started using drugs in big numbers
Mm.
to try to find some transcendence in the world.
Mm.
Money had not answered their problems. Everybody thinks money's the answer to their problems
Yeah.
until they get some.
That's true.
And then they realize,
Yeah.
well, maybe this isn't the answer to all my problems. But their children absolutely know
Mm.
that money is not the answer to their problems. And so they started looking for other answers. And of course, LSD and drugs that didn't free love, as they called it in
Right.
those days, that did not bring happiness. It did not bring fulfillment. It brought death and frustration
Mm.
and failure.
Mhm.
And so people began to look for something different. By about 1968, the Jesus movement was born, and it
Mm.
happened all over America. If you saw the movie Jesus
Yes.
Revolution, that tells you what happened in about
Mhm.
1970 as the Jesus movement really caught on in Southern California. I was in Florence, Alabama when that happened, and we had the
Mm.
exact same thing happen in our
Really?
church that happened at Chuck Smith's church in California.
Really?
Oh yeah, and it was everywhere in the country. It was everywhere. A lot of it came
Wow.
out of David Wilkerson's ministry in New York City with
Okay.
the drug addicts
Right.
there. Of course, that same ministry had a big impact on San Francisco in the
Mm.
revival, the
Mm.
Jesus revival that happened in the Haight-Ashbury district
Oh.
of San Francisco, out of which Lonnie Frisbee came and went down to Southern
Oh.
California to Chuck Smith and all of that. So, yeah, all of that was related to David Wilkerson's ministry in New York. It took a little while to brew, but man, when The Cross and the Switchblade, the
Yes.
book about David
Right.
Wilkerson, came out in about 1970, man, the country just exploded with enthusiasm
Mm.
about Nicky Cruz and what
Mhm.
David what David
Right.
Wilkerson had done. That movie, the Run Baby Run, or excuse me, The Crossing the
Crossing the
Switchblade.
switchblade, yeah.
It was just a massive hit all over the country.
Wow.
My church in Florence, Alabama, bought a copy of that book for every school student in our city
Wow.
and gave it to all the school kids to read. It sort of had a what do you call it, an unintended consequences, because in my school the kids started playing gang out on the there were the Mau Maus and the bishops and the and the crooks and all out on the playground, and I got beat up by the Mau Maus one day, so I wasn't too happy about that, but I was happy that people were looking at
Yeah.
Jesus, and we were so full of enthusiasm to evangelize. So,
Mm.
we just wanted people to know Jesus.
Yeah.
Andre Crouch's music came on. We started singing different songs at church that
Mm.
were oriented towards young people. The
Okay.
eyes of the church just focused on young people.
Yeah.
And man, did the churches grow. Millions and
Mm.
millions came into the church during those years of great awakening, what I call the fifth great awakening. And then about 1989, we knew that the awakening was over.
Mm.
That was when Jimmy Swaggart fell into disgrace. There
Right.
were televangelists, Jim Baker and Jimmy Swaggart and others, Marvin
Mhm.
Gorman, all those Assemblies of God guys,
Yeah.
unfortunately. But they all fell into sin and disgrace. And by that time, the movement was over. The
Mm.
Jesus movement, the charismatic renewal, they really hit the skids at that time, and the country started unraveling.
Mm.
Those were the late years of the Reagan administration, and George H.W. Bush became president after him,
Yeah.
and things just started unraveling. We had the first Gulf War, and then Bill
Mhm.
Clinton came into office,
Mhm.
and the morals of the country under Bill Clinton just collapsed because of
Mm.
the Monica Lewinsky scandal.
Right.
Everybody in the country was talking about what happened in the back rooms of the White House, and
Mm.
terms came into use in our society that no one would have spoken out loud in public ever to
Mm.
describe what was going on in the
Yeah.
White House. And of course, children were constantly hearing their parents talking about these things, and they started trying it out. And
Mm.
there was a lot of moral degradation that happened during those years, and certainly the George W. Bush years didn't turn that around.
Yeah.
He was a good man, but the society was in free fall. And of course, during Bush's time, you had the 9/11
Yeah.
attacks on New York City. That was towards the end of the unraveling and towards the beginning of the crisis.
Mm.
By 2007, there was no doubt we were in crisis. We'd been
Mm.
through the the Afghanistan war and the Iraq war,
Yeah.
what they call the forever wars these days. They
Yeah.
just went on and on and on. By 2007, we were certainly in crisis. We suffered the global financial crisis during that time.
Right.
We went into winter, right?
Mhm.
Came out of the fall of unraveling and went into winter of crisis. And we've been in crisis at least since 2007. I would say maybe since
Mm.
2004,
Mhm.
in the beginnings of the wars over there. Um, but those crises will come to an end here pretty soon.
Mm.
Today, it was interesting. People will be listening to this maybe months and weeks and months from now. But
Yeah.
today, the stock market just recovered tremendously because President Trump put the tariffs on hold, except for the
Oh, he
tariff.
did?
Yeah, he put a huge tariff on China because they retaliated
Right.
to his retaliatory
Right.
tariffs, and they retaliated again. And so he took out the big gun and hit them with a 104% tariff
Right.
because he wants to put an end to China's
Mm.
manufacturing dominance.
Mhm.
And he announced that he would suspend tariffs on all the rest of the world for 90 days
Mm.
and would reduce the overall tariff to 10%.
Mm.
And of course, the stock market responded enormously. And so, you know, it's very likely that we will get through the crisis in the very near future and move into a time of economic boom.
Mm.
And so that economic boom should last about 20 years. And when it's done,
Mhm.
or rather, when people figure out that money isn't the answer to their problems,
Right.
of course, the boom will continue on through the time of the awakening. It
Mm.
won't the boom won't come to an end necessarily in 20 years, but
Yeah.
people's um, attention will
Mhm.
start wandering because money's not going to solve their problems.
Yeah.
During that time, the church will see renewal. There will be revivals in the church. You notice that I'm talking about revivals differently than
Yes.
awakenings. We'll come to that in just a minute.
Yeah.
But the church is going to see great revival over the next
Mm.
few years, and when the awakening hits, we've got to be ready for it.
Mm.
I mentioned that revival is not the same thing as an awakening, at least
Mm.
not the way I'm defining it in the
Sure.
book.
Right.
You know, phenomena can be described in all kinds of words, and some people
Right.
use awakening and revival as synonyms. They might use renewal the same way, but there's all kinds of words you can talk about. You know, the outpouring.
Mhm.
They talked about the
Yeah.
Asbury outpouring because they weren't sure it was a revival, so they called it the Asbury outpouring, right?
Yeah.
But it does seem to be part of a revival, and there are revivals happening on campuses across the country right
Right.
now. There are churches that are
Mhm.
experiencing great revival. The beautiful thing about revival is that it's a theological event.
Mm.
It can happen whenever God says
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
Note when I say God said yes, yes to what?
Mm.
Yes to the prayers of God's people.
Mm.
I don't think there's ever been a revival that didn't come as a response to prayer.
Mm.
You know, even if you look at the first great Christian revival, which was the day of Pentecost,
Mhm.
what were the apostles
Mm.
doing before the day of Pentecost?
Right.
For days, they were up in the upper room praying and seeking God, calling out to God.
Mhm.
Jesus had told them they would receive the gift of the Holy Spirit within a few days, and they
Yeah.
were praying, God, keep that promise.
Yeah.
Well, some of them were praying for, be put on thrones in Israel, I'm sure. But they were praying.
Yeah.
And God responded and poured out the Holy Spirit on the day of Pentecost. Whenever God's people call out to Him in prayer, and boy, especially when they do that on a sustained basis, you
Yeah.
can expect revival to come.
Mm.
It might come to the church across the street, but it will come. And God responds to the prayers of His people.
Mm.
So revival can happen anytime, and that's the most important thing I want to
Yeah.
say in this
Okay.
podcast is that revival can happen anytime. God
Mm.
is not limited by theories and patterns
Sure.
and cycles and all that stuff. God can act anytime He wants. He is sovereign over the affairs of humanity,
Mm.
and so He can act anytime in revival. An awakening is a societal event that occurs on a cyclical basis about every 80 years.
Mm.
You might have a revival that was greater than an awakening.
Right.
And here's the ugly part: you could have an awakening that doesn't help the church.
Right.
Um, in American history, every time there's been an awakening, that's 5 times so far in American history.
Yeah.
Started with the Pilgrims.
Right.
The Pilgrims came during the Puritan Awakening. Our country
Mhm.
was born
Mhm.
in revival.
Wow.
Um, but then it came again in 1725 to 1745, roughly. That's what historians call the First Great Awakening, what I call the
Mhm.
Second Great Awakening.
Mhm.
Um, the third time it happened was in 1800.
Mm.
Historians call that the Second Great Awakening. The fourth time was in the 1880s. We had unbelievable growth of the church.
Yeah.
They had the student volunteer movement. 40,000 American college students went into missions as a result of the
Wow.
student volunteer movement
Mhm.
and served God overseas and just changed the face of world Christianity. It was
Mm.
unbelievable the
Mhm.
outpouring of God. Pentecostal movement was born in that Fourth Great Awakening, and then of course the Jesus movement in the
Yeah.
1960s. So about every 80 years, there's going to be an awakening. But if the church isn't ready for it, that awakening won't help the church that much.
Mm.
An example of that would have been what happened in Europe during the time that America was having the Jesus movement and the charismatic renewal. I
Right.
mean, Europe saw it, it knew what
Mm.
it was, but it
Mhm.
didn't adopt it,
Wow.
not on a societal basis. A few
Mhm.
people were blessed, a few churches were blessed, but as a whole, Europe did not embrace Christianity during that last awakening. Instead,
Mm.
they embraced multiculturalism. They embraced postmodern deconstructionism,
Yeah.
and basically have deconstructed their countries now, so they're not even sure what they're supposed to be or think anymore.
Mm.
And there's great crisis in Europe.
Mhm.
That's why it's such good news that England is seeing revival.
Yeah.
And we're hearing the same thing from France.
Oh,
The Assemblies of God churches in France are slam full right now
really?
of native born, this is crazy, native
Yeah.
born white Frenchmen
Wow.
are coming to church. And the Roman Catholic Church in France reported its largest number ever of people coming for the imposition of ashes on Ash Wednesday.
Mm.
I honestly believe, when I was watching the rededication of the Notre Dame Cathedral this year,
Okay.
and I guess it was like back in it was in December, wasn't it? But when I watched that and I saw the kings and queens of the world, the heads of state of the world, flooding to Paris, going to the Notre Dame Cathedral to worship God
Mm.
in the rededication of that
Yeah.
great medieval cathedral, I thought this is the day when everything turns in Europe. Today is
Mm.
an important day in in the
Wow.
history of the world. Europe is going to come back to Jesus. And I believe
Mm.
that with all my heart. That's my next book. I'm going to tell
Okay.
the story
Yeah.
about what it's called the rebirth of Christendom. And
Okay.
it's about how European countries are beginning from Hungary to
Mm.
Ukraine to Romania to lots of other countries as well. Greece
Mhm.
are Italy like crazy,
Mm.
are re-embracing Christian society, Christian civilization, and stating forthrightly, "We are Christian countries."
Mm.
And they're doing that because they don't want to be Islamic countries, because they're seeing tremendous um,
Right.
uh, disruption in their
Right.
countries. Not in Eastern Europe because they
Mhm.
decided early they didn't want this,
Mhm.
but in places like England and France and Holland,
Germany.
Germany,
Yeah.
Netherlands,
Yeah.
of course, Norway, Sweden, all those
Mhm.
countries are seeing real turmoil now because of the
Mhm.
conflict.
Mhm. Mhm.
Uh, because lots of Islamic immigrants to this country are looking to take over, and
Mhm.
they're saying so out loud and in
Right.
public.
Right.
So a lot of countries of Europe are beginning to say, "No, we wanna be Christian countries," and
Mm.
Italy just announced they're gonna return to teaching the Bible and Latin in public schools to
What?
reemphasize their Greco-Roman Christian civilization. That's the
Wow.
president of Italy, Giorgia
Wow.
Meloni, that just said that the other day, and, they're determined they're going to go back to Christendom.
Mm.
And it'll look different. Christendom this next time will look very different than it did in the old days
Mhm.
because
Mhm.
in the old days, Christendom was empire.
Mhm.
Today,
Right.
it's nationalist countries saying we want to be Hungarians, we want to be French, we want to
Mhm.
be Dutch,
Mhm.
and so it's going to look really different. This new Christendom is going to look really different than the old one,
Wow.
and it's actually going to be a lot better
Right.
than the old one because
Right.
it'll be more biblical in the way it approaches things. But I really believe that we're going to see a great awakening around the
Right.
world within the next 20 years.
Mm. So, Dr. Castleberry, you mentioned that number 80, right? You said every 80 years we see a great awakening happen. Why is that number 80 so significant? Why is that so important? And what does that have to do with
Well, I don't
generations,
think the
right?
number 80 is that important. Let me say that. I mean,
Okay.
it can take 90 years, it can take 100 years. As a
Mhm.
matter of fact, between the first Great Awakening and the second Great Awakening in America, it took about 100
Okay.
years. So it can take 80 to 100
Okay.
years. So there's nothing magical about the number 80. There's nothing
Yeah.
magical about the number 20, but it kind of matches the human lifespan.
Okay.
Human beings live between 70 and 100 years.
Right.
And so ages tend to last about 70 to 100 years. Um, I mean, we talk about the age of George Washington or the age
Mhm.
of Lincoln,
Mhm.
uh, the age of Eisenhower, or, um, when we do that, we kind of will name a whole period of history after one of its most
Mhm.
outstanding individuals, right?
Yeah.
Leaders. But yeah, it's a constantly moving thing. It's one of the things that makes history so complicated is it's
Hmm.
always moving forward. It's never staying, history's it is what it is, but the world's always
Right.
changing.
Yeah, and I when I hear you speak and then when I read, I can see how Strauss-Howe theory, if every generation is about 20 years, that means that when you look at the so what I'm hearing, you can clarify for me, right? But what I'm hearing is when I hear the number 80, that's what you're really saying is 4 generations,
Roughly,
right?
yeah. Yeah.
Roughly,
Yeah.
right? And how do those 4 generations, uh, they kinda have like a pattern, right, according to this theory. And could you explain to us what that pattern looks like when it comes to generations?
Oh, well, the generations are interesting in that
Yeah.
way because you tend to have a succession of dominant generations
Okay.
followed by recessive generations.
Mhm.
It's kind of like it's often the case. So it certainly is not destiny. So if you are, I want to say to you, if you are the
Right.
child of a very prominent parent, that doesn't mean that you can't become equally prominent or outdo
Sure.
your parents. A
Right.
lot of times that does happen.
Mhm.
But often, you will see that the children of a great leader don't don't adopt leadership.
Mm.
They'll kind of shrink back and
Mm.
not follow in the pattern of their parent.
Okay.
Um, you know, how many presidents are succeeded by their sons
Mm.
or daughters?
Oh,
Uh,
I never thought about that.
Hardly any, right?
Right, right.
As a matter of fact, I think it's 8 presidents of the United States were orphans and never had a father.
Oh.
It's
Mm.
actually a thing that sometimes greatness in a human being comes from having not had a great father
Mm.
or not having had one present at all.
Mhm.
So lots of presidents have been orphans,
Mm.
and orphans tend to often be they'll that often an orphan will have that extra drive to
Right,
achieve that makes
right,
them into a great leader.
right.
So can't really predict this stuff, and sometimes you'll have a great leader follow after a great father or a great
Mhm,
mother.
mhm.
But there is sort of there's a tendency for
Yes.
there to be dominant and then
Right.
recessive, dominant and then recessive. So, and then in addition to the dominant recessive pattern,
Mhm.
Strauss and Howe note that one kind of dominant generation would be called a hero generation.
Okay,
That's what, say, the greatest generation, the people that fought World War II,
okay.
they were called the greatest
Mm.
generation. They were heroes.
Mm.
The generation that followed them, they call those
So silent
artists. They
artists.
call them artists, but that generation was called the silent generation.
Right.
That type of generation is called the artist
Okay.
generations, but they were called the silent generation
Mm.
because they didn't get to go fight World War II and be heroes. They were children suffering under rationing while
Mm.
the older
Right,
generation was out
right,
fighting the war and
right.
then creating the post World War II economy that was the greatest economy in
Mm.
history. You
Yeah,
know, they
yeah.
didn't call them the greatest generation for nothing. They
Mm.
were incredibly accomplished. They
Mm.
had unbelievable successes, but the generation following them, they didn't have quite the same experience.
Yeah.
They grew up under rationing. They learned to sacrifice early in life. They were not
Mm.
as um, imposing.
Mhm.
Of course, the silent generation was followed by the baby boomers, and they're an
Mhm.
example of what's called a prophet generation.
What does that mean?
A prophet generation is a generation that experiences a great awakening during their formative years. That
Mm.
is, the years that they're young adults,
Okay.
teenagers, late teenagers, young adults. Let's say um, from from the time that they're 20 to 40 years old or 15 to 35 years old,
Yeah.
something like that. If they experience a great awakening during that time, they become very idealistic. They become very
Mm.
committed to causes.
Mm.
They're visionaries. They're optimistic,
Yeah.
and they're very spiritual.
Yeah.
And so the baby boomers were a prophet generation, and they
Mm.
were dominant.
Yeah.
But they were followed by Gen X, and Gen X was what they call a nomad generation.
Mm.
The nomad generations, they reject organizations. They're skeptical. They're more
Right.
cynical.
Right.
They make a great generation, and if anybody listening to me is Gen X,
Yeah.
it's a wonderful generation. They're wise. They're wiser than we are.
Mm.
That Gen X tends to more wisdom than the baby boomer generation does,
Mhm.
because they're careful. They
Yeah.
don't just believe everything they
Yeah, yeah.
hear. While the baby boomer generation was up in the altar having a great time, falling on the floor and speaking in tongues and all that, the little kids in the back were looking at them, going, "No, that doesn't look too good. That looks kind of scary to me. I don't want that." And
Yeah.
they're watching from an observer point of view, not a participant
Mm.
point of view,
Mm.
and so they became more skeptical. They wanted something real,
Mm.
and Gen X was the generation that really demanded something real.
Mm.
And and you remember that? I don't remember if one of the musicians from that generation that was real popular was Alanis Morissette.
Yeah.
And she talked about, what if God was one of us, just a stranger
Mm.
on the bus trying to make his way home?
Mm.
That song was really different than what the boomers were used
Right.
to. And
Yeah.
she sang one song that was like, about her uncommitment. I got one hand in my pocket and the other one
Mm.
is holding a cigarette.
Mm.
She's always like one hand doing one thing and the other one doing
Mm.
nothing, right? It's
Yeah.
like that was indicative of a generation. The movie Reality Bites came
Right.
out during
It was
that
really
time,
popular.
and or Reality Bites,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that was very indicative of how Gen X looked at
Yeah.
the world. They were skeptical, they were cynical,
Mm.
they very careful about accepting ideas,
Mhm.
and so they called nomad generations because they
Mhm.
weren't committed to the same things their parents had been. But they made a great generation, and it's funny. It's a funny thing. Gen X uh, was they are the generation that elected Donald Trump to be president in this last election.
Wow.
They by a good strong margin voted for Trump.
Mm.
All of the other generations were either even or for Kamala Harris,
Mm.
but Gen X put Trump over the
Wow.
bar because basically you can't fool them.
Mm.
And there was so much effort by the
Interesting.
press to deceive us
That's
and
so
to
interesting.
to say no, 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 President Biden
Yeah,
is
yeah, yeah,
fine,
yeah.
and I don't mean to make a political statement here. I'm not coming out for Trump or against Biden here.
Mhm.
That's not my point. But Biden was. I mean, even his own chief of staff just came out the other day and said had really lost it
Mm.
towards the end, and people, while the press was trying to tell us, oh no, he's as good as he's ever been. Um, the
Mm.
people close to him knew that he wasn't, and that in itself, that attempt to deceive the population, man, that set off all the BS detectors. Excuse me for using that phrase on a Christian podcast, but that people just they saw no, that ain't right. I'm
Mm.
not I'm not believing that,
Mm.
and they didn't see. They didn't. They felt like they were being deceived.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's just one way of interpreting the phenomenon. You could interpret it another way. Social phenomena can be interpreted in all kinds of different ways. That's why we have political differences among us. So,
Sure.
but I think that's what I
Right.
see that happened there. And anybody that interprets it differently is welcome to their opinion.
Yeah, I'm sure we're gonna get a lot of comments on this particular podcast. We have just a
Hey, I just
little
want to
bit.
say,
Yeah.
this. I want to say this loud and clear. Being a
Yeah.
Christian doesn't mean being a Democrat. It doesn't mean
Yeah.
being a Republican. It's you have freedom. Jesus gives us freedom. Christians are the freest people in the world.
Mm.
Republicans aren't right about everything, and Democrats aren't wrong about
It's
everything. It's
true.
not just not how it works.
Yeah.
The reason and people are reasonable.
Mhm.
People are smart.
Yeah.
And people who vote Democrat because they see the world from a point of view, and they see truths, they see realities
Yeah.
and they take them into account, and their
Mm.
values stack up with the truths they see in a way that makes them want one party. Whereas the other side, they look at reality from a different
Right.
perspective. They see different truths.
Mm.
Um, and I always say that if you walk in the voting booth and you hold your nose and vote, you've got my respect. If you don't hold your nose, you're probably not looking at the whole reality, because
True.
whether you're voting for one side or the
Right.
other side, there's going to be
That's
compromises to
true.
make.
Yeah.
There are going to be things you're not going to like. But in America, we hold our nose and make a
Mm.
choice, right? And so, whichever choice you made, I want to say to you, faithful
Yeah.
listener, whatever choice you made, you got my respect, and
Yes.
I love you and appreciate you, and hope you're walking with Jesus, because neither Republican nor Democrat is
Right.
the answer. Jesus is the answer.
Right. Now, we have to kind of wrap this up, but we're gonna have another episode. But I want to share that what you just shared about Gen X is very meaningful to me because I'm Gen X. And when I look when I look on our church staff, we have a lot of baby boomers. And you spoke to this just recently. We have on our staff, we have a lot of baby boomers. We have, I think, 2 or 3 Gen X. That's it. And then the rest is millennial.
Mhm.
So you have the dominant generation, like you're saying, right?
Yep.
Then you have the what did you say?
Recessive.
Recessive generation, and then it's just reflected on our staff.
Yeah, yeah.
So I just find it really interesting because I've never heard someone speak so highly of Gen X. This is the
Oh,
first time I'm hearing because the rest of basically Gen X is like forgotten, right? We are the forgotten almost like the
The
silent
latchkey
generation.
kids
The
left at home
latchkey
alone.
kids, right? We're cynical
That's why Home
and
Alone was such a popular movie.
that's true.
Yeah, because that fit the reality of Gen
Yeah.
X. They felt like
Oh,
Kevin
yeah, we
McCauley.
related.
Yeah.
But I just feel like when you shared, like, if you are a leader and you are Gen X, you are the exception. You are special, right? And I felt like when you shared that way, it meant a lot to my generation to be able to be affirmed that way. And I just want to say thank you. Thank you for seeing, because everyone speaks about the baby boomers, everyone's speaking about millennials, which we'll cover in the next episode, guys. But take time to focus on Gen X, uh, for me personally as Gen X, that means a lot because in a lot of ways we do feel overlooked, right? We do feel like, wow, you know, all all the people under us, the people over us have all the top jobs, and then people under us are now being promoted, right? And so it's very refreshing to hear that point of view
Let's
sharing like
talk
that.
about it some more on the next episode.
Yeah, I would love to. So if you're listening and you heard something that was really meaningful to you and you want to share it with your friends, or you haven't subscribed yet, really want to encourage you, please uh, take some time and not just, this is one of those episodes that I really want to encourage you. Don't just listen to it one time. I want to encourage you, listen to it at least 2 or 3 times, because that's why we have podcasts. So you can listen to it again, because there's so much depth with what you're sharing, Dr. Castleberry, that I've already kind of heard this talk maybe for the second time, maybe the third time, and I'm still processing, right? I'm still learning. And I would encourage all of us, take some time to, that's why I wanted to make this like bite size, because I want to make it so that you're wanting to listen to this again. And so if you haven't subscribed, I want to encourage you to subscribe. And if you haven't shared, please share this episode. It's been really interesting. And so, Dr. Castleberry, thank you. Thank you so much for joining us and for just shedding light on uh, Strauss Howe theory, right? And if you want to learn more about it, you can not just Google it, but you can actually buy your book. Is there, how do we get
Oh,
the
you can get it
sixth
on
grade?
Amazon.com. It's called The Sixth Great Awakening. If you just Google that, it'll take you straight to Amazon.
Awesome.
Yeah. The Sixth Great Awakening and the Coming Renewal of the American Church.
It's incredible. And that's what I want to cover in our next episode. How do these generations, as we learn how they work together, right? How they follow one another and all of that, how it leads, how we're going to see how these generations work together to lead towards the next great awakening. So with that, we just want to say thank you for joining us today. God bless you and have a great day. Aloha.
For more information on this podcast, visit firstalg.com/apostolos.